120 seconds. 110 seconds. 100 seconds. 90 seconds. 80 seconds. 70 seconds. 60 seconds. 50 seconds. 40 seconds. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
'My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Little feedback there. Nothing like feedback to ruin a good song. The incomparable Jay Hogarth in the background on vibraphones. Professor of music down at Wesley. Good morning, my friends. It's Morning Talk. Morning Talk. I'm your host, Jay Stan McCauley, along with the champions of talk. This morning's Talk champion in the house, Jonathan Small. How you doing there, Jonathan?
Doing fine, Stan. It's a pleasure to be back here. Like I mentioned every single week, I always look forward to it. And hopefully, you had a very nice weekend or a nice week since the last time that I seen you.
Good week, good weekend. A lot of things happened this weekend. Yeah. How was your weekend?
The weekend was fine. I mean, obviously, it was a nice weekend overall. It's feeling like summertime. People are out enjoying themselves in most parts. I mean, always going to be some incidents, but it seems like people are getting the summer feel, and it's technically still not summer, but it feels like it's summertime. And I was able to look at your article that you told me about in the Hartford newspaper. A good article. I didn't get a chance to mention it to you since it came out this past week.
Oh, the insert.
The
insert, the 4-page insert.
Yes,
yeah,
if that's what you call it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about that later.
Okay.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
And you was at the Bushnell Park yesterday.
Juneteenth down at Bushnell Park. A lot of stuff happening. You got the Juneteenth. You had the 29th Civil War Regiment, black soldiers. That was Saturday. Saturday. The city's Juneteenth was yesterday. And then there's another Juneteenth over at Comora's Cultural Corner today. So it's a long weekend of all kinds of events.
And you've been busy. You've been participating in all of these events, it seemed like.
Yeah. Well, that's what you have to do,
do that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I mean, technically Juneteenth is today, isn't it?
Today is Juneteenth, yes.
Okay. But
June 19th is today.
Right.
Yeah.
And hopefully people know the history of it. I know it's good to celebrate and have a good time and, get together with different people and friends, but hopefully people know the truth. I guess sometimes people wonder if they really know the true meaning of certain holidays. You just say it's a big holiday. It's a federal holiday, right? Also.
It's a federal holiday. It's not a state holiday or a city holiday. I don't know about the state. It's not a city holiday. I know that.
It's a federal.
So Hartford, the city government is. But how much do people know about any holiday? Holidays turn into an opportunity to have fun with family at the end of the day. I mean, they may start off that way, but
I mean, it's nice. I mean, obviously the fun, the camaraderie with different people. It's a day off. That's what most people are going to be thinking about. But every now and then it is kind of good to know the true meaning of a particular holiday. If you have Veterans Day or Memorial Day, you know what. But most people are not really looking or thinking about the true meaning.
Well, that is true. I celebrate Friday 52 times a year.
Right.
The weekend is here. Yeah.
The weekend. That's a holiday to you.
It's a holiday. Yeah. Well, every day's a holiday to me. When you do what you love to do, then every day's a holiday. You never work a day in your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
You do that. Well, I was saying like you're getting in full gear towards the political campaign. So, like you said, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. Yeah, the campaign season's officially underway. Full swing. Yeah. So.
Well, this guest this morning definitely knows about campaign and politics.
Absolutely, but I'll let you have the high honor of introducing our guest. Well, certainly he's not a stranger, but I'll let you do that. Jonathan Small, you have the floor, my friend.
All right. Good morning to people out there on Morning Talk Live with Jay Stan McCauley Talk Show. We actually have a returning guest, if people remember, as far back as 2020 when this format was kind of just getting started, and he brought a lot of information to the table, and he's very knowledgeable on many different topics beyond just state government, and it's a pleasure to have him as a returning guest back to the network. The guest, no other, is a former Connecticut Republican State Senator, no other than Joe Markley. Good morning, Joe. How are you doing?
I'm great, Jonathan. Glad to be with you.
All right. It's our pleasure. Joe, could you kind of let people know a little bit about yourself and background briefly before we get into our topics of discussion?
Yes, I'm a native of Southington, And I've been a English teacher on and off over the years, at college level mostly, and but I've been in politics twice. I was involved back in the 80s and served a term in the state senate from my hometown of Southington, also representing Waterbury and Wolcott, and was involved in the anti-income tax movement back then in the early 1990s. And then I got out of politics for many years and got drawn back into it, and somewhat to my surprise, elected to the same state senate seat I had held 24 years earlier in 2010. So I had 24 years between my first term and my second term. I came back and served 4 terms, and in 2018, I was the Republican candidate for lieutenant governor, so I gave up the seat at that point. And I've been retired is not quite the right word for it, but I haven't been back in office and don't expect to be, but I've remained active in state politics to some extent, and very active in helping out folks who are involved in politics that I like and respect.
Okay, obviously you know state politics, but I want to get into a national issue before we kind of get into state politics, if you don't mind. It seems like to me of late, the whole Black Lives Matter, I don't want to say it's crumbling, but it's not seeming like it's generating the amount of attention. The donation monies have kind of dwindled down, if you want to classify it to that level. First of all, do you think the Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter, is really a good organization currently, the way it's being operating under, if you know anything about this?
I know what I read about, and maybe what I read about to some extent is hostile to it. I'll say that there's an old saying that in politics things begin as a movement, they turn into a business, and they end up as a racket. I mentioned before that I got back involved in politics in part because of the Tea Party movement in the 2008-2009, and I saw it with that. It certainly started out as a spontaneous movement, and I think very much a legitimate grassroots organization. That's how I got involved, in fact, because there were people in the Tea Party that said, hey, you know politics. We don't know politics. Can you help us out? And I started to meet with them and got involved with it. But soon there were national organizations involved raising big money, and that money was, in Washington. It wasn't coming back to anything we were doing in Connecticut. And the other thing about it, and I think this is true of Black Lives Matter too, it's true of my experience with the anti-income tax movement. You can bring the population to a certain kind of a pitch of excitement or involvement in a movement, but you can't necessarily keep them there forever. You have a window of opportunity to try to accomplish something, and one of the things you can accomplish is to build something ongoing. But you're not going to be able to maintain enthusiasm. You can maintain enthusiasm over a number of months, but you can't really maintain that fever pitch over a number of years. And I think that's happened to the Black Lives Matter movement, which isn't to say that it's over or that it was all for naught, but it has peaked. And what happens after this, I can't say.
Yeah, but did you ever feel like the money that was being raised, did it really reach the people or the type of organizations or the agencies or the movements that it was really truly designed to reach? It seems like to me you're hearing people who were part of running the board of the Black Lives Matter or the higher levels were really raking in millions of dollars. And it seems like to me if it's a nonprofit or whatever type of organization it was classified as, shouldn't have been some type of audit to really monitor exactly where the money was really going to and what the money was really designed to do?
No, that's why I say that to some extent these things become a racket. And people, it's human nature in any kind of a movement. First of all, there's people that get involved in something like this because they see an angle. Right, and they say, hey, there's something happening, and maybe I can get my share. Or there's people that get into it for good reasons, but when there's a lot of money flying around in any undertaking, there's a temptation, And sometimes I think people that start out as good people can fall to that temptation. I have no question that that has happened to some extent with Black Lives Matter. I think part of the problem too is there was probably more money coming in because of the corporate support for it. You know, it wasn't just a matter of people writing a check for $20. It was businesses that wanted to be on the right side of an issue that were willing to write checks for tens of thousands or even millions of dollars. And I think that it was always a somewhat ill-defined goal. If you said, okay, we're going to raise money for, if you said we're going to raise money for the Tea Party, let's say, you could say, well, we're going to use it for political candidates. Maybe that would be one use. We'll find people that are on our side and we'll support them. I don't think Black Lives Matter was ever going down that road. So one would say, well, what were they going to do with that money? I don't know that it was ever clearly defined. And that's kind of a formula for abuse. It doesn't mean that the idea was bad. It doesn't mean that the people that supported it were bad. But there might have been a lack of clarity about the mission.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fair to say. And I think when you mention the word racket, you know, we don't want to say the whole, and you definitely gave a good explanation of exactly, you know, the goals was very tremendously worthwhile, and the people, because it's like a separation of the local chapters of the Black Lives Matter comparable to the whole national level. And sometimes you don't want to mix all of the organizations locally connected with the nationally. So I think you gave a good explanation, and I appreciate your honesty and your assessment on this particular topic. Obviously, you know a lot of state level issues. Governor Ned Lamont is trying to bring in a professional hockey team, the Arizona Coyotes. Do you think this is a good move that government or the governor should be getting involved in trying to bring a professional hockey team to the state of Connecticut?
I guess the short answer, Jonathan, would be no. Let's say this. If I were governor and there was a sports team interested in coming here, I would say great. And if it were a matter of giving them a call or paying them a visit, I'd be happy to do it. Mm-hmm. That's not what it ends up being about. It ends up being about monetary incentives. And in this case, the big investment to bring this team in would be work on the Hartford Civic Center. And that's something that I've been opposed to for a long time. I think it hasn't worked. And I feel like we're at this point, it's good money after bad. I'd also say this, Jonathan, you know, politicians are distracted by shiny objects. So you say, what can I do for the state of Connecticut, or what can I do for the city of Hartford? Mm-hmm. And the answers tend to be, you know, let's bring a sports team in. Let's bring in museums. I'm a great fan of museums, but I think that these are arts events and so forth. That's nice stuff. But what you need in the city is jobs, really. You need jobs. You need good infrastructure. You need public safety and order. And I think that there's nothing romantic. There's nothing flashy about a screw machine shop coming to Hartford. But I really would rather see a screw machine shop than a professional sports team. And the Civic Center falls into this too. The argument I've always had, and I've talked to a lot of people about it, people in Hartford, the mayor himself, I understand they want the best for Hartford, and they see this as something that could bring business into Hartford. But I feel like the experience of the Civic Center is people come in from the suburbs, they drive into a parking garage, they go to an event that has restaurants and bars right in the building. And in fact, one of the things they want to do is build it up so that it has more restaurants and bars inside of it. Then they get in their car and they drive home. I don't really believe that's doing a great deal for the city of Hartford. I'd like to have people in Hartford that can have jobs that they can walk to. And if we can get some more people in Hartford and get some more money in Hartford, the sports and the events will follow, in my opinion. But I don't want to see us spend hundreds of millions of dollars, which is what it would cost, to fix the Civic Center on the chance that a hockey team is going to show up. I think it's very unlikely that a hockey team comes back to Connecticut. There are much bigger markets out there with many, many times more people that that also would be interested in competition with us.
Well, Joe, first of all, what do you do with the XL Center? I mean, even if we're not trying to bring a professional hockey team to Hartford, don't you still feel the XL Center, we need to make a decision on what you do with it? Should it be renovated? Should it be torn down? Should it be sold? I mean, isn't it something that you think we need to do with this particular building?
Absolutely. And that's the conversation I had with the mayor years ago. I respect Luke Broden. He's an intelligent man. I think his heart's in the right place. And he said to me, I don't think it was entirely confidentially, but we were talking about this subject in an event casually. And he said, Joe, I don't want to have a huge empty building in the center of town. And I understand that completely, but I think that's what you're stuck with. I don't think it's going to work. It's only the only side of it now that really works as a sports thing is having UConn games there. And that's kind of like we're doing the games there because we got the building, not the other way around. Mm-hmm. The music isn't coming back to it. There's other venues and better venues, and especially with the competition for the casinos. I think at a certain point you got to say this hasn't worked. And it is, in fact, a big dead space in the middle of Hartford. And it's a dead space and a kind of a barrier. And I think you got to say, let's knock it down. Let's turn it over to a private developer and see if they can get some mixed use development there. And you look at something like Blueback Square in the center of West Hartford that has become a destination, and you say, well, I mean, all that is a case of saying let's try to recreate something that's like a city that's pleasant in a different venue. I'd like to do that in Hartford, but what makes the city work is not having a big event space. It's having the vitality of the street. If you go to New York City, it's because you like walking down the street and there's restaurants and there's bars and there's shoe stores and there's people and there's action. And you still have that a little bit in, like I always point to, say, Pratt Street in Hartford as being a street that still retains that kind of spirit, but that flame is getting mighty low in Hartford, and you'd have to try to build it back up. But I'd try to find a developer that wanted to make it something that would draw people downtown, or somebody that wants to do something there that is a real that's a real hub of employment, not just an occasional event with people parking cars or whatever, but a proper, whether it's a proper factory, a proper office building, a proper operation right there in the center of Hartford. But I think there's a point where you got to say it didn't work. If you remember, Jonathan, as I'm sure Stan remembers, the Civic Center was built as much as a mall as it was as an events venue, and it operated as a mall for many years, but it didn't make it. I don't think they would have built it if they thought all it was going to do was have some sports teams there, because then it's a dead thing during the day. The idea with the mall is shoppers in the day and spectators at night, but it just didn't work.
Well, Joe, this is something unique to other arenas throughout the country, that you have to put other things inside the arena other than just relying on a professional sports team or college teams to play? Like, if you was to go to Madison Square Garden, maybe that's not a good example, but that's one of the longest, oldest arenas in the country. Do Madison Square Garden have anything else that they rely on to keep that particular facility vital?
Well, they got a train station, of course, right underneath it, basically, and there's a certain amount of retail around that. Mm-hmm. I think one of the dangers, though, is comparing the situation in Hartford to another city that's not necessarily comparable. Mm-hmm. Certainly, there's sports arenas that work, mm-hmm. and there's cities that are vital and growing. Right. And I wish Hartford were one of them. I honestly believe that Hartford still has the good bones, as they say. I go down there and I think it still has still a beautiful city in a lot of ways. Excellent buildings, still got a great museum in the Athenaeum, got the Capitol building and the rest of the government buildings, Trinity College, and there's a lot there, but it's not vital anymore. I was down at the Athenaeum recently, and I was amazed that I could park. There's parking spaces. 5 o'clock, there's no traffic on the streets. You can drive out of Hartford. There's no traffic jam. That's nice it's nice for me, but it's bad for the city of Hartford. You got to try to get that back. And unless you have that, you can't say, oh, we could be like New York if we build this thing. You'd say, first, we got to get the people and the activity and the desire of people to live there. I mean, people all over the country, all over the world want to come and live in New York City. They're not thinking that way about Hartford.
Well, again, Joe, I admit that was not a good example. I mean, I believe the New Haven Coliseum was torn down years ago.
Yeah.
And I think the Springfield, whatever they call it, the Mass Mutual Arena, it only holds about 8,000 people. So that's not a lot of people if you really sit back and look at it. But again, sometimes comparing one successful arena in a different city is not always a good example. And, you were mentioning about the XL Center in particular. But there's other issues that goes throughout Connecticut. As a former state senator, did you have any type of interactions or any type of opinions on, let's say, the Black and Latino caucus that exists in our state legislature?
Not with the caucus so much. I guess I would say that I dealt with legislators in both parties as individuals, and you tend to know the ones best that serve on committees with you. The whole 10 years I was in the Senate, including my long ago first term, I was either the chairman or the ranking member of the Human Services Committee. So I dealt with legislators, especially that were on that committee. And again, I'd say that people are people in the end. Doesn't necessarily matter what caucus they belong to or even what race they are. You've got to take them for who they are. And generally, I had pretty good relationships with the last one that. All the time that I was there, I would say I had good relationships with my colleagues in both parties. I never felt like there was any reason to be mad at somebody just because they disagreed with you, or even just because they opposed you on something. That's like it's like it's like being on a different baseball team. There's no reason that you go out and you play the game and you play it hard, but there's no reason that you should have anything against somebody just because they ended up on the other side. And especially, I admire politicians who are sincere in their convictions, regardless of what those convictions are. I happen to think Stan falls into that category. I prefer that to somebody who's in politics because they feel that they can get ahead somehow. I'd rather see people that are in there because they're believers.
Well, Joe, so far I'm liking and I'm agreeing with everything that I'm hearing from you. It sounds like Stan is in the same agreement with you. Stan, do you have any questions you want to ask Joe Markley?
No, he's absolutely right.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
I the only thing I would do is I chime in and as I have said to you on many occasions, Hartford is not New York.
Right.
And we don't have a population of a couple million.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, well, I admit that was not a good example.
No, but but Jonathan, you're right. The comparison is in a lot of ways to New Haven, and New Haven is also a city that is in sad decline. And what New Haven has that Hartford lacks is Yale, right there downtown, a huge presence, and I think that's has generated a certain amount of activity, and it preserves a certain vitality in an area of New Haven. But if you took Yale out of New Haven, I think New Haven has even bigger problems than Hartford does at this point. And then there's poor Bridgeport, which really doesn't have either the state capital or the university going for it. And it's tragic. I feel like you can't have a success in a state in the long run when you've got great cities like that are not working, and the only thing that's going to make it work is economic vitality, and that's a tough job. You're back to almost having to build from ground zero.
Well, Joe, when you say that they're not working, I mean, it's like a combination of different factors between the fiscal structures of the cities throughout Connecticut, the urban cities, and the human capital. I mean, if you go through any particular of our inner urban cities, you're going to see a lot of high unemployment, underemployment. There's some problems in the school system. Illiteracy rates are very high. Stan, you've mentioned this many times about the capital city has one of the highest illiteracy rates in the state. You have crime. I mean, you can have a college student, it looks like from UConn, on the right track, and all of a sudden he ends up having marijuana found in the car, and he gets killed. And I don't really personally think, and I could be wrong making this statement, I don't think the governor and the mayor took that incident as seriously as they could have. And maybe it's not good to pick one crime over another crime. But the incident of the Black Lives mural, that they found a person, I guess, who had wrote something over it. You know more about this incident, I guess, than I do.
Well, that was the kind of like it was unfortunate, but you have a guy who's just kind of like walking through with two of his buddies, and they decide to be vandals and destructives, like throwing a brick through a window. It just happened to be, you know. This is probably the worst analogy of the year, but it's probably like some guy decides he wants to just throw a brick through the window. Unfortunately, it happened to be the crime boss's window.
Right.
So, you know, sometimes you just do the wrong thing at the wrong time, and I think that's what happened here. I don't think it was some big conspiracy. It was just a knucklehead, and
But I mean, Joe, and you could chime in on this too. I mean, it seemed like to me the mayor and the governor was more focused on making sure that this is not, and it's important. You don't want to divide the city. You don't want to have any racial conflicts. But it seems like to me this drew more attention than the college student who was killed. Is that kind of mixing maybe your priorities? I think you can do both. I think you can address both issues. But it seems like to me this college student, and I know it's still under investigation, but this is what continues to plague our cities, you know, decade after decade. You just get these homicides and these crimes, and truthfully, on a political level, it just didn't seem like it really drew that much attention. I could be wrong about that. What's your take on this incident?
Well, it is. I think that one of the discouraging things about Hartford and about our inner cities throughout the country, not just in Connecticut, is the extent to which we have accepted violence and we don't think about it anymore. That a shooting, you know, so I look at the Hartford Current in the morning, and if there's, it's not unusual that a couple of people were shot, not necessarily killed, but sometimes. And it's kind of business as usual. It's not like everyone comes to a halt and says, how can that happen? We've accepted that happens. And I suppose I was actually talking about this on another radio show not too long ago, but I said, if I were running for mayor of Hartford, for instance, and we got somebody here who is, I think the first thing I'd say is I would make public safety the number one priority. Public safety across the board. It's not, whether it's white on black, black on white, black on black, Asians, whoever it is, we got to have people feel secure. And you're not going to get people into the city of Hartford until they feel that way. I'm amazed at the people I know who, if I say, I'm going to go up to the Athenaeum or I'm going to go to Hartford Stage, and they say, I haven't been in downtown Hartford for years, because they're scared of it. I think it's unreasonable. I don't think downtown Hartford is anything like that bad. I'm sure there's some neighborhoods that you might be well advised to be careful in at certain times of day, but to go downtown in Hartford, to me, has not ever been a difficulty. But people have that attitude. You can't expect anything else good to happen in a place until people feel secure, and that means having a strong police force that has a connection with the community, and giving it support. Hey, the other thing I'd say is that when we talk about unemployment, about crime, and the other problems in the city, they're kind of trailing factors. The city goes into decline, and then you have these problems. The cities exist because once upon a time, that's where the employment is. It's always a funny argument to me when I hear people say, Hartford or whatever city you're talking about needs to be able to expand out in their taxing powers out into the suburbs, because that's where the wealth is. And I think the idea that we'd say the answer for Hartford is to get money out of Glastonbury. If you went back 100 years, people would say, Glastonbury, what's there? There's just a bunch of farmers. The money is in Hartford. People are moving to Hartford for jobs. And now the world is turned upside down. The jobs aren't in the city anymore. And if you can't bring the jobs back to the city, I don't know what you can do to fix them. Once upon a time, conservative Republicans like myself, Jack Kemp was a great hero of mine back in the 80s, were big fans of enterprise zones, to say, let's give advantages to businesses that locate in cities. It was tried to some extent. I don't think it worked. The other thing I'd say, incidentally, Stan mentioned, both of you have mentioned the problems of schooling. And again, there's no question that I'd say, along with public safety, education, if you want a future in a city, is one of the most important things. I think that what we're doing isn't working. And again, conservative Republicans would say we need to have school choice, which is to say we need to have a lot of different approaches and give parents the means to be able to choose what they think will work best for their kids. And I think that's, I understand the arguments against that, but I think that the situation's getting to the point where we got to try something different, and that there's great potential there.
Well, Joe, the only thing I will kind of not even disagree with you, because you're saying you have to bring the jobs back to the city, and certainly there has to be a motive factor to bring jobs back to the city. But I hear that there's really a skill set gap throughout Connecticut. I mean, if you go to Pratt and Whitney, and I would imagine Pratt and Whitney is not going to employ as many people as they did in the past, but I think you can certainly still look at some career opportunities at Pratt and Whitney. That's in East Hartford. That's not that far from your centralized cities. And if you don't get people properly educated and trained, even if you bring good paying jobs back to the cities, would the people that really need employment, would they be beneficial to these type of jobs? Or would you just be bringing in other people who, in some cases, you could say many people come into the cities and they do work and then they exit the cities, and then that's it. I mean, so you can bring jobs, you can bring good jobs back to the cities, but does that mean the people that needs good opportunities are going to be beneficial to these jobs?
Not absolutely directly, or as it's not as simple a thing as one would like it to be. But one thing, we're talking about Pratt and Whitney, talking about what Connecticut used to be rich in, which was manufacturing. One of the nice things about manufacturing as an industry is that there are, at least there used to be, a lot of entry-level jobs in manufacturing. Obviously, there's a demand for tool makers and machinists and people that have an actual skill in manufacturing. But once upon a time, you could kind of walk in and somebody would say, here's a drill press, let me show you what to do. I've done that job myself. And it's not an entertaining job to sit and put holes in a piece of metal for 8 hours a day. But it's a job that, at least it is a job. And it's a job that sometimes can lead to something. You get in there, you start doing the work. If you're a good employee, you've got the chance. They say, okay, well, let me show you a little. If you're going to be around for a while, I'll teach you a little something, and your value increases. The other thing I'd say is just the fact of having employed people starts to spin off other jobs. So then you got the lunchroom, or you got the shoe store, or whatever, because there's people walking around in the neighborhood that have some money in their pocket. And that's what built Hartford up in the first place, and that's why the Bushnell Auditorium is there, because you'd say, hey, we got a city, we got a lot of people with money. Let's put in some entertainment venues. Let's build a movie theater. Let's build a supermarket. It didn't take the government to do it. When there's a profit incentive, people will find it themselves. But you got to have some economic vitality. How to bring back manufacturing to Hartford at this point, it would be tough. But that would be, if I were Governor Lamont, or if I were the mayor of Hartford, I would be much more interested in trying to find that kind of thing than in bringing a hockey team.
Well, again, Stan, you're running for mayor. Is that a good blueprint, in your opinion, how to bring back a city? Get a certain level of jobs and make sure people are educated and trained and deal with the human side of people. Is this a good mechanism towards developing a city, towards what you would like for it to be?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't make the city a place where people can get employment, government. There are many who believe the government creates jobs. That is not the case unless you're working for the government.
For the government, right?
The private sector is where jobs come from, and you have to create an opportunity and an atmosphere within the city of Hartford that says to companies, I want to move my company there, or I'm going to take a chance at moving my company there. But if, majority of your people can't read or are illiterate, it's just, depending upon the data you look at, it's either 41% or as high as 61% of the adults in Hartford are functionally illiterate, which means they, for all practical purposes, can't read an ATM machine.
Right.
So if you can put your company anywhere in the world, and you can nowadays, what separates Hartford from everywhere else? So I think that there are misplaced priorities. I think there are. I don't think that everyone necessarily has the best interest of the overall city and its constituents at heart. I think they're trying to do the best they can with what they have, and they're being very reactionary, as opposed to proactive and really taking a look at the problem and setting the course for real change. So you're gonna have to have some human development, and you have to focus on schools. You gotta give people a feeling that if I move to Hartford, I'm gonna send my kid to the public school, and my kids are gonna be educated. They're gonna walk away with the tools necessary to be contributors to business. When people start to see that, they'll move and they'll take the chance in putting their businesses here. Well, Hartford is in a very precarious state right now.
Right.
And so I agree 100% with what he's saying.
Well, Joe, you mentioned off of the air that you've lived in Virginia and Massachusetts. Are there similar? Seems like if I listen to the news in Boston, I have family up in Boston. Roxbury, Dorchester can be like a nightmare at times. It has a lot of crime, a lot of poverty. The cost of living is very expensive. Unemployment is real high. Is it not? Do you see a lot of differences between, let's say, Virginia, Connecticut overall, and then Massachusetts and Connecticut?
One of the amazing things about, I suppose it's true in most places, but certainly it's true in Connecticut and Massachusetts. I think in New England more than a lot of places in the country is you go just a couple miles and you're in a different world, right?
Right.
And that's certainly, boy, in Connecticut you can go from some of the richest communities to some of the poorest communities at 5 miles, and you can go from the center of the city up to up into the middle of the woods 5 miles. I lived in Northampton. I went to school in Amherst, so I knew that part of the state, and that's very much a college area. Northampton has become a very shishy, pleasant kind of city if you like arts and you like restaurants and so forth. My wife is just retired as a professor up at Williams College, which is all the way up in the northwest corner of the state. Really couldn't be more different than Dorchester. So it all depends. The problem is the places that were working. Just what I said. Once upon a time, Hartford was 100 years ago, 110 years ago. Hartford was maybe the richest city per capita in America. Our problem has been these places that were doing well have gradually gone downhill. I think if I were the governor of Connecticut, which is that's the part of state government, the state level of government, I think the best way to help the cities is to make the state as strong as possible. And when we talk about Pratt & Whitney, for instance, the amount of, the jobs have been it's kind of leaking away from Pratt and Whitney as they move their operations into other parts of the country. Part of the reason is because the taxes are high on corporations in Connecticut. I would want to try to make the state of Connecticut as attractive to business as possible, and that I believe that would then benefit all the towns in the state, not just the Hartford, but Southington as well. Southington used to have a big Pratt and Whitney plant too, and when I was a kid, just about everybody's father in Southington worked for Pratt and Whitney. That's long gone, but Southington has managed to kind of transition into a bedroom community and held on. But we need those jobs back. Virginia, different. I lived in Northern Virginia. It's a big growth area, and really, back to Stan's earlier point, it's a growth area because the government is the employer down there, and the federal government's a big employer. So there's a lot of people with good jobs and with money down in Northern Virginia.
Yes, that's true. But if you really break down Virginia and you talking about, let's say we're talking about the cities, and if you go to Richmond, Virginia, you're going to see very similar problems with high unemployment, poverty. You go to Norfolk, Virginia. They have a unique city to somewhat degree, Virginia Beach. And I guess the Navy plays a tremendous role. We've had one of the economic development directors from Virginia Beach on this program in the past. Is it somewhat that the cities are just not designed structurally in many levels to really be competitive? I mean, you just can't, in my opinion, and you mentioned it earlier, with public safety. There was an individual in the capital city, Hartford, this past week. He was killed by a hit-and-run driver. I mean, you mentioned that you have people that will tell you they're not going to come into the city, and this is the part that they're telling you that they're not going to come into. Sounds like a very safe part of the city. But if you have a breakdown of public safety and people hearing about reckless drivers, and it can happen anywhere, don't get me wrong, but we've talked, Stan, the chance of you being hit in Hartford and other cities too can be very high at times just by a hit and run driver. It's just a neglect, lawlessness that you mentioned last week. And I don't know if fiscal government can really solve these problems alone. You got to get some help, I think, along the way. State legislators can play a role, definitely city council people, mayors, grassroots organizations. I think we all have to feel like we're in this together. And when I listen even to you with other media outlets, and you seem like you're real balanced, Joe, it's always, well, the right is against the left is against the right, the Democrats, you control the cities, you have destroyed the cities. Republicans, you have a conservative measure that we don't agree with. It seems like it's a complete breakdown when you get into the big political parties too, Joe. Is this any truth that you have experienced when you was a state legislator?
Well, you said a mouthful there.
I know, I did, yes.
Hey, let me, let's see, where should I go with this? Well, I do think that the Republican Party, well, the people in the cities have to decide that they're fed up with it. We're not going to stand for this anymore. We want an orderly world. Mm-hmm. I know what I wanted to talk about, though. You're talking about problems and how do you fix disorder. Rudy Giuliani, once upon a time, was a respected figure. Now he looks like a buffoon. But he accomplished something that rather amazed me in the city of New York. I lived in New York too. I went to Columbia at graduate school. Mm-hmm. So I was in New York in the early 80s, and it was pretty rough in those days. And it got worse into the 90s. And I've always spent a fair amount of time in New York. In fact, I'm going down this week. So it's a city that I was familiar with and I remain familiar with. It reached a level in the 90s where I was starting to think, this is getting a little more than I can take. I don't like walking down the street, even if I may feel safe, but if I see people every block, somebody in distress, somebody lying on the sidewalk that looks like they need care, it's a tough thing to put up with emotionally. Giuliani came in as mayor and started, it was broken windows policing, as they call it, which is to say we gotta start cracking down on just little unruliness. And if we can get things to feel like there's some kind of order, it'll grow from that. And by golly, he really transformed the city of New York. I wouldn't have believed that it could be done, but the difference from the early 90s into the early years of the 2000s was a considerable difference in the city of New York. It's going in the other direction because there's been a different philosophy. And I've reached the point, it's funny, the last time I was down there, I thought, I don't know if I ever want to go on a subway. I don't want to take my wife on the subway in New York because there's too many people that are clearly troubled and out of control. And I got no control over this situation myself. You need to create public order on that level. But if you do it, good things will happen. And I think that absolutely the majority of the people in any city want to have their sidewalks be safe places, clean places, and orderly places. If you can start to move it in that direction, and that should be a nonpartisan priority, in my opinion. It's not. I can't imagine the party that's in favor of urban disorder. I don't think anyone in the legislature, I don't think anyone in the city government wants that. But you have to actually say, okay, if we're going to have order, there are rules that we have to enforce, and we have to give the police the power to enforce them. So that's just to take one section of your statement, Jonathan.
Well, that's a total agreement. Obviously, if everybody feels you need law and order, I don't think anybody would have a problem with law and order. I think maybe who wants to be in control, who wants to make the decisions, how we go about it, might seem to be the bigger problem than just saying we need law and order. You know, some people are in favor of more police. Some people feel, community or police measures would be better. Some people, the Democrats will tell you we have to spend more money. I know fiscally you feel government needs to have less money being spent. It's just I think it's the approach, how we go about trying to resolve a problem more than saying the problem needs to be resolved. I don't think there's no disagreement. The problem needs to be resolved and everybody would feel much better. The problem is the approach, how we go about getting the problems resolved seems to be the division when you get into our state with the state legislative. And truthfully, it's always been said that Connecticut is a blue Democratic state, that the Republicans, and I wanted to ask you about this too.
Yeah.
Why is the Republicans can't seem to make a dent, particularly in our cities, number one, in your opinion?
Well, Connecticut is a blue state, but probably not as blue as it appears. And one piece of evidence I'd give for that is that until this last election, the Republicans either have won the gubernatorial race or come extremely close every time since 1986. So you had Rowland elected governor 3 times. You had Jody Rell. You had Tom Foley lose twice, close elections. But when I was on the ticket with Bob Stefanowski, it was a close election. So the Republican Party isn't dead that way. And we had reached the point in the state Senate where we were in a tie, had 18 state senators, Republican, 18 Democrats. I think that we've gotten kicked in the teeth the last few elections, and I'm feeling like the trajectory is in the wrong direction. Now, you talk about the cities, and I will tell you that within the Republican Party, there's much weeping and wailing about what are we going to do about the cities. And I think that this last time around, Bob Stefanowski made an extraordinary effort to be present in the cities. Linda McMahon had done it 10 years ago. Didn't work. And in my opinion, the reason is that you can't do it in a single election cycle. You can't even do it over a period of a few years. You got to rebuild a Republican Party in these cities. And again, it's like bringing jobs back to the cities. It's not a project that you're going to say, it's in 2 years, in 5 years, we fix the problem. This is like planting a tree so that your grandchildren can enjoy it. But the very fact that you've got an open mayoral seat this fall, and the Republican Party is no factor in that. And it was true in New Haven too. It's past the point where anyone even thinks, gee, I could be the Republican candidate for mayor. They'd say, I'd just as soon run as an independent as run as a Republican. you got to start by building it up piece by piece and say, if we're getting, I think Stefanowski and I got 13% of the vote in New Haven. We're not going to get 40%, but I think it's possible to say, let's try to build up to 16%, 18%, and have something of a party. And if you could do that in Connecticut, the Republicans at the state level would be much more competitive, because at the moment you start out, hundreds of thousands of votes behind, basically, because there's a kind of a built-in loss in the city, and there's no easy way to address that. But you've got to stand for something in order for people to want to join your cause. And I think that's one way in which I'd say I'm more conservative than most of the people in my own party. And I think it's important for us to have a clear notion. And part of that notion is what Stan said before, which is government doesn't create jobs. Government doesn't necessarily have the answer to questions. Government has to undertake policies that allow the answers to emerge. We became a great manufacturing state not because there was a government policy to that end 150 years ago or 100 years ago, but because people looked at Connecticut and said, there's opportunity there, let me go there and build something. And we've got to get back to that way of thinking.
And of course, the people have to be part of the solution, even when you're saying getting involved with state government and city government. And that still seems to be a big challenge, is how do you get people to really buy into the political system and the political structure? You have to be educated about the whole political system. You have to know what the purpose is. You have to believe in it, and you have to be somewhat committed towards it. And if you look at the dwindling numbers of how people can win, particularly mayoral elections, with so much of a low registered voter population base voting, I still don't think that sounds good. I think it's effective. You could obviously get the person elected, but when you have, let's say, a 60,000 registered voter base and maybe 10,000 out of 60,000 registered voters, maybe you want to respond to this, Stan.
Yeah.
Isn't it still some imbalance to that picture, even though the person can become elected mayor, that people just don't vote, that's registered to vote?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway from that is the fact that they're disengaged. Mm-hmm. So they're not just disengaged from voting, they're disengaged. They're disengaged from the process. The government works because the people work it. It's not the party's government. It's the people's government. So if the people disengage, then people that run things do what they think is best. It's not necessarily that there's something nefarious or folks are trying to get away with stuff. If somebody thinks a particular way and they get no feedback from the other 100 people in the room, well, I guess we'll do it my way. Now, if your way doesn't work, but no one else is contributing to any other solutions, then you wind up in this kind of muck and mire of inefficiency. But, if people have to get involved, you have to go to city council meetings. You have to go to Board of Ed meetings. You have to, you have to be willing to lift up your end of the load. You just can't elect somebody and then expect them to just do everything. They're not super people. They're humans, and they're working as part of a team and part of a system. And so it's essential that people are actively engaged and involved. So to me, it matters that people aren't voting, but the vote is just it's like the surface. If you get high voter turnout consistently, then you have people who are actively engaged and involved. So if you use, for example, like a Board of Education meeting in Avon or in West Hartford, Board of Education meeting in Hartford. The staff is there, the cabinet for the superintendent's there, or the production crew is there, and there's like no one else.
Yes.
When you go to West Hartford, they have to make rules to limit how long people can talk because there's so many people there. They'll talk, and they don't have the opportunity to conduct the business of the board, listening to parents. So there's a very high involvement and engagement, and that speaks a little bit to what we were talking about earlier with the high rate of illiteracy.
Yes.
And so there are a lot of things that contribute to it, poverty, but all of these things are fixable if someone is intentional about fixing it.
All right.
In my opinion.
Amen.
Oh,
I agree
amen,
with
Joe.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a trailing indicator. The voting. I agree completely with what Stan said. The trouble isn't that people are voting. That's like the tail end of the problem. The problem was that they checked out. And we had proposals in the legislature this year to make voting mandatory, and I think it's completely backwards. It's to my mind, it's a little like saying let's fix the city by bringing in a sports team. There's a more fundamental problem than that people feel doesn't matter. And I think also something that's broken down throughout the country in most communities are the other structures that got people active. Involvement in churches, involvement in community groups, involvement in ethnic groups. There used to be all kinds of different organizations that had strength that drew people together, and that in many cases were kind of existed side by side with the political system. And those organizations and that kind of community involvement has diminished tremendously and sadly. We had a lot of great traditional structures in America that have unraveled in recent decades.
Well, Joe, obviously, I think everybody got to do their part. And if you're not engaged or you don't believe in something, it's going to be hard to really force someone, I think, to do something that they really don't believe in. And if you look at, like I say, the realities, I mean, yes, the whole going to board meetings, Board of Education meetings, city council meetings is very important. It's needed. But if you are just made up your mind that I'm not interested, I'm not going to waste my time, I'm not going to do it, I don't know what else you could really do. I mean, you can go to the people. I guess you could go, you can walk to the streets where people are at and tell them you need to go to this particular meeting, but that's not the best way.
You have to engage folks, Jonathan. There has to be some intentionality. You get in a causality loop. If this, then that, then just keep going around into a vicious circle.
Right.
The unintended consequences of good intention are sometimes really bad results.
Right.
So, the economy wasn't the only thing that shut down as a result of the pandemic, but social structures shut down. So if people aren't going to church for 2 years, and then people are afraid to return to church, and they become disengaged with that whole spiritual section of their life, the church was a very central component in many communities. If it's gone, well, if everyone rallied together, if they shared information there, they talked about issues there, now who are they talking to them about? So people are very much isolated and they become individualized. And so me rises to the surface instead of the group. It's same thing if you can't talk to people, you're not going down to the social club. You're not at the hunting lodge. You're all of the places where people meet were diminished. So people become more disengaged. And because they're not around collectives of people, they wind up being siloed with individuals who think exactly like they do.
Right.
You have no more exchange of ideas, counterpoint, arguing about things that you disagree upon, and then coming to consensus. Those things start off in little groups and they go into bigger groups. So the system has to be primed again. This is going to take a while. But if you don't have people that engage in this, it's not going to happen. And I personally think that this has to start at the local level. It has to start really down. Even like for politically speaking, it has to start at the town committee.
Right.
If people talk about holding their government accountable, well, how about holding town committee people accountable? They're the first level of government. Yet people seem to think that they are almost insignificant.
Right.
No, they're very significant. So we have to kind of prime the pump again, because things are, it's not hopeless.
Yeah.
But it can be fixed.
Well, the only thing I want to just say is I hear this quite often, and I just heard it now. Okay, the pandemic made the situation worse. Okay, the pandemic did make the situation worse. But at what point can we kind of say we've got to move beyond the pandemic and let's say were problems before the pandemic?
Real quick analogy. clown decides to throw tacks on the street as you're driving down, and all 4 of your tires blow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the fact of the matter is you don't have tires in your car anymore.
Right.
All right. Well, how long are we going to keep blaming that? Well, until you get some tires, that's the cause.
Right.
We're not saying that the pandemic is a justifiable reason for things, but you have to take an analysis of where we are, what was the cause, and now you move forward. It's like backward engineering or doing an investigation on why the plane crashed. Well, if we can figure that out, we can stop it from happening again, and we can make adjustments accordingly going forward. We know what the problem was. Now we know now we need to implement the fix. And that's, I think, where we're at. We're in the implement the fix phase of what happened less than 2 years ago.
Well, Joe, again, I mean, are we in the process really of fixing our problems? Because I think in some areas, as you mentioned earlier, from Governor Ned Lamont, some of our current mayor in the capital city, I kind of get the feeling that you don't think the way that we're going about trying to fix the problems is the best way to go about fixing the problems.
Yeah, that's politics, right? That's what it comes down to, is that I think everyone would like to have the same positive results. The question is, how do you make it happen? And I think that what's the essential difference between the parties is, I think that the Democratic Party, generally speaking, thinks that government can drive things in the right direction, and that if government has more power, things are going to get better. I understand that point of view. I don't agree with it. I think it's the other way around. I think the power of government is a dangerous thing. One of you mentioned unintended consequences earlier, and I think that we frequently see unintended consequences to government policies. You say, wouldn't it be nice if we did this or that? And then you do it. You say, what could go wrong? Well, you don't find out until you do it. And I think that we need to try to get government out of the way of private initiative. Boy, I couldn't agree more with what Stan said. We also need to get back to, again, what I think is basically a conservative outlook, which is bottom-up government, where you say the most important decision should be made on the local level. If you want to change things, don't change it by worrying about who you're going to vote for president. Not that that's not important, but influence where you can influence it. You got a great opportunity because of the relatively low involvement in a city like Hartford. The people that want to get involved have a great opportunity and can have disproportionate impact on moving the community forward. But they've got to realize that they've got that power. They've got it locally, and they've got to be inspired. And I honestly hope Stan can be a part of that, of convincing people that their political involvement is worthwhile, and that it can be a positive thing. It can even be, I can say personally, it can even be an enjoyable thing. Sometimes I feel like the Republican Party for me was, instead of the Elks Lodge or the, whatever, the bowling league. But it's where I had friends. It's where I had involvement and activity and interest. And I hope other people can see that, and especially in a city like Hartford that needs it, and hop into it.
Well, Joe, it's a pleasure having you on this particular morning, and let's try to leave it on a somewhat of a uplifting, positive message. And I think you just ended it to some degree on a positive message. And I always like to listen to you on other radio shows, and you bring a lot of good information, and you brought a lot of good information this morning to the show. And briefly, if there's any last words you want to leave the audience, feel free to do so.
Well, no, I just appreciate the opportunity, gentlemen, and I'm happy to do it again when the time is right. I'm glad that you guys are doing this in such a determined, ongoing way to try to get the word out of the community. So anything I can do to support it, I think it's a worthy effort.
Definitely, I definitely appreciate that, Joe, and definitely will hold you to that statement if it ever comes to be that we really need some support in another different area. I definitely love to hear that, what you just stated.
Well, thanks again for taking time out of your schedules. Good to see you again, and to talk to you. I always listen to you on Gary's show. John said other stations, but I always listen to you on with Gary
Bryant.
Gary Bryant with his cup of coffee.
Okay.
All right, it's good to see you, Joe. Stay blessed.
Likewise. Good luck, Stan.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care, Joe. All right.
All right. Joe Markley.
Yeah, it seems like you remember him when he was a guest 3 years ago.
I remember all of your guests.
All of your guests, okay.
All of them.
Well, that was 3 years ago when you was first getting started.
Yeah.
And everything.
Yeah.
So you do listen to him on the Gary Bryan show.
I listen to Gary every morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do that.
I listen to Gary in the morning, and I listen to Man in the afternoons. Yeah.
Seems like to me,
Big Todd.
Todd Feinberg. Seems like to me, even though he's a Republican, Joe Markley, that if the two of you ever got together and y'all was kind of working towards a particular goal, it sounds like to me y'all could still work together with really.
Well, I can work with anybody.
Anybody, right?
I do work with people. I work with people who hate each other. You know, that's between them and them. But no, I can work with anyone. Yeah.
But I mean, like, if you're trying to make a decision, even myself, if you're trying to make a decision, like with the Excel Center, do you think it needs to be fixed or torn down? We may be in disagreement towards, okay, should we put more money into the arena? But it sounds like to me, Joe Markley, you could definitely work with him. He seems to be open-minded and not his way or the highway.
Well, I think in politics you have to be open-minded. It isn't about my way. It's about what's going to be the best way. And any individual who has an opinion or an idea is just one person.
Right.
I mean, how does your one person opinion supersede the other, 120,000 that live in Hartford, or the other 350 million that live in America? I mean, or the 8 billion on the planet. But you got to have a starting point. And so you have to be willing to listen to other people, come to a consensus, and then move forward with what we all hope is the best decision. And I think we also need to come to a place where we can look, analyze, and see it ain't working.
Yeah.
And if it's not working, can we redress it? Can we change it? These people get caught up in this stuff like it's like, they gave birth to it. These aren't your children. They're ideas.
But, recently you've got involved with the African American Alliance and a few other people, and you were working with Speaker Matt Ritter on some issues regarding the section of Hartford with the flooding and the basement issues and the funding. And it seems like to me that working partnership came to some type of good conclusion.
Well, it was good negotiations. It was tough. It was rough. But in the end, everyone got something so that they can move forward for the best of the community. Everybody wants what's best.
Right.
And sometimes as you have those kinds of discussions, people can get emotional. They can get principled. They can get hyper focused. Sometimes they can lose focus. But all of these things are part of the human experience, and you have to work your way through that toward a solution. Well, that's what happened.
Well, my only point is, I was saying, and I heard some sound bites, about 20 to 25% minority contractors' participation or city residents. And I think that would be a good goal, or some good goals to aim for as well. Okay, we got to fix a problem. We got to make sure people's homes are in proper order. But again, if it's going to be a lot of money generated from a particular project,
we'll take a short break. We'll talk about that on the way back. But at the end of the day, the whole purpose of this is to get people home fixed. That's the primary purpose, and I think that it's important that we don't lose sight of that.
All right.
We'll be right back. Stick and stay.
How do you define evil? Is evil the pedophile school administrator, or taxation without representation? Is it the gatekeeping community leaders who sell out the very people they were elected to fight for? Or is evil the politician that puts out lies and takes in cash? However you may classify evil, having to choose the lesser of two evils still leaves you with evil. Nowhere does this rule apply more than during an election for mayor. Choosing a candidate who is the lesser of two evils still leaves you with evil. No wonder so many people don't vote. It's time for the constituents to flip the script and vote for a mayor you can trust. My name is Jason McCauley. I am an independent thinker, and I approve this message. I'm asking you for your vote on Tuesday, September the 12th, 2023, in the Democratic Party primary election for mayor for the city of Hartford. I, like you, am an independent thinker. So let's sit down and talk about my path to victory and why my 5-point plan for Hartford will work. Stop listening to the uninformed evil interests that tell you I can't win. For more information, visit McCauleyformayor.com. Have the courage to vote your conscience. Vote for the name you trust and know. Vote McCauley for mayor. Every bad political decision is made by a politician elected to office. So if you think your vote doesn't matter, just remember this. There are people sitting with politicians in a back room making deals about your future, making policies about your children, making decisions about your neighborhood. To them, you are just a vote. You are not their cause. You are just a vote. Elections have consequences, and if you don't vote, you are actually voting to keep these people in power to work against you. Now more than ever, you need to make your vote count. It's time to clear the air and vote for a mayor that is unbought, unbossed, trusted, and accountable to you, the constituent. My name is Jason McCauley, and I am an independent thinker, and I approve this message. I'm asking you for your vote on Tuesday, September the 12th, 2023, in the Democratic Party primary election for mayor of the city of Hartford. For more information, visit McCauleyformayor.com. Have the courage to vote your conscience and vote for the name you trust and know. Vote J. Stan McCauley for mayor.
Hi,
My name's Jason McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back, Morning Talk. J.C. McCauley here, along with the one and only Jonathan Small.
Right.
Good first half.
Yes, I mean, it's been a while since we've had Joe Markley on, and, you know, getting a former state senator from Connecticut on the show just to get his opinions and feedback. And again, he knows what he's talking about. He's done the work in the past, so he knows what it's like to be a state legislator. He was part of this income tax rally with Tom Scott back in 1991. So he has a long track record in state government and other areas. And like I say, we talked off of the air. He really didn't want to get too much into the NDC issue because that was just something that he really wasn't that abreast to in every particular area. He knows a little bit about it. And
It's very granular, very, very city focused.
City focused, yes.
It's a local issue, really.
But it's a local issue that has some big money, and you know that's my whole approach from the Clean Water Fund.
Money is a resource.
Well, however you want to classify it, you can say it's just a resource or whatever the case may be. When I'm mentioning about minority contractors and opportunities, that sometimes always some people get the short end of the stick. Yes, it's good to make sure that the main purpose of the project is to provide the type of issues of people homes that have basement flooding issues and sewer issues and get that part of the project done. But somebody has to still do the work. There's money.
That's true, Jonathan. That's true. And Lord knows, a whole lot of people have been fighting for folk to get work for a long, long time. This flooding stuff's going on for 40 years. So we can sit around to argue about who's going to get a piece of pie at the table and everyone's starved to death.
Yes, I understand that part. You know, make sure that we get the work done and don't debate or argue about who gets the work. But I mean, I think sometime, and it wasn't really put into any legislation when people are talking about 20 to 25% of the contract. Is
Right.
that part wasn't legislated.
That would have taken us into the end of the session 3 years from now.
Right.
My personal point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I want basements to be unflooded with I don't want human feces in people's basement, and I want them made whole. That was my position from the jump.
Right.
And that's really all I care about.
And that's fair enough.
Because that's
right.
the problem. And I don't confuse everything else that could be added to it when we're trying to fix a particular problem. Now, the rest is gravy. The rest are all of the side benefits, the windfalls. All of that stuff is great. I don't care what they do as long as they get the people in my city's basements from flooding with human feces.
Well, you see, again, I could take that approach too. I don't have any problems with basement floodings and sewer issues. So I hope that the people who get, and I was told this by someone from MDC, that's really, you don't have that particular problem. You don't have a particular home that has basement issues or flooding issues. I would hope if I had that problem that it would get resolved. So yes,
now it's going to get resolved.
It's going to get resolved. But the whole picture, and I didn't get a chance to even ask Joe Markley about this, about government contracts in the state of Connecticut. I don't know, again, if people in Connecticut just accept the fact that when it comes time for minority participation in contracts, well, we don't have the numbers. We really can't expect much to really come out of that particular area.
So then we change it.
Change what?
We would change the numbers.
No, I meant the numbers of the population. The numbers of the percentages of minorities getting the actual contracts is low to dismal.
Right.
We change it, and sometime you use a particular project, like the upcoming project with this infrastructure development work, as a way to make changes. It's good to suggest something.
We should have as high a level of minority participation in the upcoming project as is humanly possible for as long as they can. At some point, all of those problem houses will be fixed. Then what will these people do?
Right.
So, this is not about, and you and I have had this conversation for at least 15 years, or 10 years at the very least. The MDC provides water and sewer services.
Right.
It's not an economic development program. It's a water and sewer program. Now, there can be economic development opportunities it could be employment opportunities for people.
Right.
All right. The economic development that the MDC provides is that it provides clean water and sewage, which allows for companies and organizations to build here. Because without water and sewage, you ain't building anything.
Right.
Therein lies the economic opportunities for them. Now, people can turn the MDC into whatever they want it to be, but it is a water and sewage delivery system. That is what it does. Just like the gas company or the electric company. And I understand people wanting to take as much of an advantage as they can whenever opportunities come. So, be prepared for these opportunities when they arise.
Right. Well, that's part of, I can say the same thing at Bradley International Airport. They got a major development project that's upcoming. The airport is designed to run passenger services and businesses.
Right.
But somebody is going to be developing part of the expansion of Bradley International Airport. And right now, I see Pagnelli as the general contractor. I don't have the business knowledge to know exactly what really is going on. I can only tell you what I see. And I'm not going to make examples of Atlanta or Georgia because that's not a good example.
That's not a good example. No,
Right.
I'm glad you're not going to go there.
But I think we can do better in Connecticut regardless.
It would be nice if we did better. Can we do better? That remains to be seen.
Well, why couldn't we do better?
That's a good question, Jonathan. This is a discussion I've had ears in this discussion for over 20 years.
Yeah.
So when are we going to do better? The next 20? We'll do better when we stop talking about it and actually people do something about it. Folk that are in a position to make the change and be held accountable for the deliverables. That's how you get stuff done.
Well, if you're a contractor and you put out a bid for a particular project, that's what you are supposed to do. If
Right.
you're seeking a job and you fill out the application
If
process
Pagnelli doesn't get it, who will?
as a general contractor, I don't know who else. I don't know anybody. He seems to be a big general contractor.
He is a big general contractor, but he ain't the only one.
He's not the only one.
So if he gets it, someone else ain't. My point is, so Collier gets it, or someone else gets it,
Yeah.
or some other big national conglomerate.
Right.
Whatever happens, someone's going to be on the outside looking in.
Exactly. That's true.
Not just black folk, Asians, Lithuanians, Bosnians, Jamaicans. All right, people from Trinidad. Only one person gonna walk away with contract.
Right.
So if you want to compete for contracts to put airports down, then you need to have airport kind of legacy.
Well, the general contract, again, I'm not a general contractor. The opportunities, could arise when you're developing expansions of a particular airport.
Right.
And everyday business. I mean,
Right. So what airports? We have one airport here. We have another airport. We got an airport down here in the Meadows. That airport could be lengthened, the runway, 400 feet. You'd be able to put all kinds of things in there. So there might be an opportunity to do some serious construction down at the airport here in Hartford, Brainerd Airport. So if I was in the airport construction, airport kind of business doing contracts, I would be looking at what is the potential that might actually stay an airport, and how can my company benefit from that opportunity growth? Where else is there an airport? There may be an airport in any number of cities across America. Which ones of them are due for some sort of construction in the next maybe 10 to 15 years? And I'd be shooting for those things, because they have the contract. They have the discussion when you hear that they're looking for the contractors. You are like 8 years too late. And so it becomes a discussion about what could be, should be, would be, here, this, that, the third. And it's always for naught, because at the end of the day, nothing's going to change. Because you come to the discussion after all the deals have been cut and made.
But you probably were never involved, even if you're saying down the road 5 to 10 years.
You have to insert yourself. I do freelance video. And I have clients who come to me. But if they come to me, they're not coming to somebody else. Right now, I'm referring one person that I know who's very, very good, I'm not going to say their name, to my clients when my clients come to me and ask me about stuff, and right now I'm offline. So I refer to them. Now, once I refer my business to that client and he does a good job, the chances are they're going to stay with him. Then I'll have to fight to get my clients back. And the only way I'm going to get them back is if he somehow fails to deliver.
Right.
Because they're going to be satisfied with his work. So they're going to call him again. That's how that works, Jonathan.
Yeah.
They're like, I can't wait for people to come to me. They don't know what I do.
Well,
I have to seek out. That's the responsibility of contractors. Now, once they start doing that and they find that there is discrimination, they find that they're being muscled out, now we have an issue that we can attack.
And who say that wasn't? But who say that wasn't the case in the past with contractors?
That can be the case, but that's not what I'm hearing. If you can show me where you're being muscled out or discriminated against, those are actionable things that we can actually do something about.
So the previous clean water project of MDC with the clean water project, when minority contractors were protesting in front of the MDC headquarters, you had Rufus Wells.
I was out there protesting.
Okay, they weren't muscled out. That you didn't feel like they were being squeezed out or left out. I don't know if there was any percentage of minority contractors through legislation put on the paper.
They weren't getting their fair share of the work, because there were plenty of qualified individuals. They just weren't getting their fair share of the work.
All right.
That was years ago.
Yeah, but that could have a long you don't want to go back in the past.
Right,
but
that has long-term effects that are being realized now, but we cannot go back in time. So where are we going to go from here forward? You were talking earlier about blaming stuff on the pandemic, which there's still people walking around town with masks on while they driving their cars. That's how fresh the pandemic is. Now, so if we're gonna dispense with the pandemic, then we should also dispense with discussions of stuff that happened 10 years ago.
Well, I will tell you, some of this work is going to be 10 and 15 years. See, again, I'm being played this game. Okay, well, don't go back to the past. If you don't come to the table correctly with the proper preparation, or if what you just stated, you're coming now where the work is about to get started, that you're coming into the game late.
Right, and that is specifically referring to the work at the airport.
Oh, okay. So not the difference between MDC work and the
The
airport
MDC work right now has mechanisms in it to make sure that stuff is going according to plan. When stuff doesn't go according to plan, then you act on it.
All right.
You cannot act on a thing that has yet to be done.
Right.
And project its failure before it starts.
Well,
if you know it's going to fail before you start, then you take care of it before it starts.
Right. If you're not really taking in a position of power, and we can talk around this issue the best we can. And I understand it's not an easy when you're talking about $1 million contracts or how much money contracts.
Just a contract.
It's just a contract.
But to the person that has a contract, the $50,000 contract is just as important as the $50 million contract.
Yeah, but you're going to see a lot of contractors, they get a lot of smaller projects, and you work with what you can work with. I'm not going to tell people, okay, put all your eggs in one basket, because that's not the best approach neither. But again, examples of political leadership saying we really want to have minority contractors participation. We really want to have city residents. You mentioned the airport here in Hartford in the North Meadows, how that could be an economic opportunity. Everything got to be coming together, though, for that to happen.
That's a given, Jonathan.
So, and I'm not going to say you're trying to convince me to accept something I don't believe in.
No, I'm not trying to convince you.
Because that's not going to wash. But I will listen and respectfully listen to what you have to say, because I definitely respect a lot of things. And most things that you say, you are correct on. How you feel about minority contractors here in Connecticut getting the short end of the stick going forward? Not to say that it has happened yet, but talking to key people involved in certain projects of already what I've heard, that we only going to go by the people that names are on the list. If minority contractors' names are not on the list, they're not going to be used on this project.
So then so that means we have to do what we need to do to get them on the list.
Right, exactly. Get their names on the list.
This is not rocket science.
But I don't like this constantly coming up with one reason why.
Then there's
another reason why.
Remember, your conversations are apparently with someone who has an inside track on what they would like it to be. My conversations are with the people who actually gonna make it that way.
All right.
No disrespect to the person you're talking to. No one, including myself, no one, including me, is irreplaceable. Everybody that has a job, everyone that has a position can be replaced.
All right.
Period.
So meaning what? I mean, after that somebody can be replaced or removed.
Right.
Okay, so they're not invincible.
Go talk to Donald Trump.
Right.
You want to talk about invincible human beings in America that seem to be able to get away with whatever they want. Everyone has their limitations. There are rules.
Right. Let's see how things work out. That's the best thing that we can do. Because
so let's let the game begin. Before we talk about deflating the ball for Brady, let's get to the game next week.
But hopefully people are going to be in the game. That's all I could say.
I want people to be in the game too, Jonathan. But until the game begins, you don't know who's going to be pitching.
Yeah, but see,
you can be pessimistic about it, and that's a legitimate approach. I talked to a lot of people that are pessimistic. There were people that were pessimistic that this, where we are right now, would not happen.
Well, I wasn't one of them, though.
You were one.
Well, I was not one of the people that was pessimistic that what you were, because I was not even aware that you were working with the speaker, Matt Ridditor. So I can't say I was one of the pessimistic people.
Right. I don't believe in talking about stuff I work on.
Oh, okay.
I believe in showing you what I did.
Right. But involving the game of economics and business and real power, and if there's a game that's designed to have people on the outside looking in,
that's not a game.
That
Jonathan.
is not, to me,
that's not
always
a game.
pessimistic. I think that's just being upfront and being real with what you see.
So if we're going to have an upfront, real conversation dealing with the realities of what you refer to as the game, if the fight is fixed and you're putting your money on the wrong boxer, it would be great if the boxing commission would step in and play the rules by the game. But it is clear that the game has been tainted. The commission is involved. The betting people are involved. The bookies are involved. The mob is involved. Everybody's involved in the fix, Jonathan.
Right.
So makes no sense talking about how unfair it is.
Right.
Learn how to play the game with the fix. Because anything else, given by the rules you're setting in the discussion, is fruitless.
Well, this whole thing came about when I started this conversation about minority contractors,
Right.
and city residents towards employment opportunities.
To the degree that you can make that happen, make it happen. We have oversight. We do the oversight. We have enforcement. We do the enforcement. Now, if the oversight shows that someone's not doing stuff, there's ways to enforce those rules. If you don't enforce those rules, then you will deal with the consequences of not having them enforced, which means people don't get the job opportunities that they have.
All right.
These are political decisions. If you decide you don't want to enforce the number of people that should be working for a particular project that are minority, then whose fault is that? That's the enforcement entity's fault. There are people who can be held accountable. It's not a discussion. Hold them accountable. What we have is a lack of action. There's no one executing, making sure that the things that should be done are done. And if you don't hold people accountable, they are not going to deliver.
All right.
And accountability means consequence. We have a city who runs, and there are no consequences when people do things that they shouldn't be doing. So you can't expect stuff to be done right. If you've got a department that's supposed to be doing inspections on restaurants and hair salons and barber salons, and they don't do them, then what do you want?
Yeah, I just heard recently the inspections staff in Hartford is understaffed. They don't even have enough.
Right?
people.
How's it understaffed? That's an unacceptable.
You don't buy that.
I did no. And I want to hear how you can't find people. It's an absurd notion. And I say that with the full realization that may be me one day having to make those decisions as to how come you can't find the people. Find them. There's a solution to that.
Right.
There's a solution to that. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's one thing, okay, saying, well, we having problems finding people. It's another thing to find a way to get to find the people that you're having a trouble finding. I think that's what you're kind of saying. There's no denial that there's understaffed in certain inspection departments.
As the chief elected official, it is not my job to micromanage. I will go out and find people. And if I have to find people and hire them, then whoever's working for me that does that job can start looking for another job. If I ever have to do your job, then I don't need you. That's an old adage I've had for ask anyone that's ever worked for me, to things as simple as answering the door or picking up the phone. If I have to answer the phone, whoever's responsible for doing it is fired, period. That's why you're here. The phone rings 4 times. Pray to God that I'm not near the phone. Because after the 5th time, it goes to voicemail. I don't want the phone going to voicemail when we have staff that can answer the phone.
Right.
Put them on hold and then answer the phone. We're not having this discussion again. So let me answer the phone one more time and you can find somewhere else to work. This is real simple. People have to give you, if you understand, and that's not being mean. It's setting the level of expectation that you want from the staff. And it's not just office staff. It goes all the way to department heads down the chain. But if people aren't held accountable for the deliverables, then all you get are excuses for why not.
But you know what? That could be almost a mechanism of life, about things that's being allowed to happen. And whether it's gun violence or illiteracy rates, I mean, okay, something is not working why people can't read or write, a 61%. So now we get into, okay, is it the school system's fault? Is the parents' fault? See, this is, again, debating how, but you want to get the problem resolved. That's
right. I don't care whose fault it is. I want it fixed.
Right.
I'm not here to, I don't do the blame game.
Right.
I see the problem. Get it fixed.
Right.
Get it fixed. Right. Now we understand why it happened. Don't let it happen again.
Mm-hmm.
You get one shot at repentance.
That's why
you're being paid.
That's why certain jobs and certain positions is designed for certain people. That's why city council, you don't have the temperament, as you had stated, not even what I'm saying, because you will run into this for years. We got to deal with it on this level. We got to fix this first before we can get this fixed, and all of these issues. And some people are good temperamental people that can talk about things and debate things and work and be patient. And there's other people who want to get the job resolved, who wants to get things done. So there's different avenues for different people.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I mean, if you're talking about problems that look like they're not getting any better anytime soon, I mean, I don't think there's no sense of urgency that I'm running across. And, you know, knowing how to read or write, you would think that's a basic fundamental element.
Absolutely.
That shouldn't be nothing out of the ordinary.
No.
That's something that you should expect everybody to know how to. Some people are going to be better
especially
readers.
after you graduate from school.
Right. Now, some people are more better readers and writers than other people, but at least the basic fundamentals, as you can read, you know, an ATM card or ATM, as you stated.
The ATM machine. If you can't read what's on the ATM screen,
mm-hmm.
and how to operate it, then you're that's the level of functional illiteracy that we have. That means you can't fill out a contract. You can't read a proposal. You can't really write a proposal.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have a reasonable, rational debate with someone about a policy because you can't read the policy yourself to see what the policy actually says. So I could tell you the policy says one thing, and then you may believe me, even though I'm not telling the truth, because you can't go and verify it.
But
so people are diminished.
Yeah, but see, the thing about it is you have to just wonder, man, with expectations, is this really a big priority? See, that's another area.
It isn't a priority, but it needs to be a priority.
Right.
In the McCauley administration, it will be an absolute priority.
Yeah. Because really, you was one of the first persons that I had ever heard that mentioned about the high illiteracy rate in Hartford. I didn't monitor it to really know, okay, you know, you don't walk up to the average Joe on the street and say, well, do you know how to read or write? You just, maybe people have this assumption that everybody knows how to read or write, and that's just not the case. We have
people that don't read or write well have coping mechanisms. They can get through life just fine. This isn't an issue of can they be successful. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, but you're absolutely diminished. But now, you know, talk about parent engagement. No parent is. First of all, a lot of parents are intimidated when they go to school anyway.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'll trigger the wrong attitude out of school caused me to trigger.
Yeah.
I'll take my kids out of school before I'm right there on the spot.
Mm.
So most school people dealing with my kids understand that, and I've never ever had a problem in a school. However, a lot of parents are very intimidated when they go into the school because, you know, it's like when you go to the bank, you hope the bank gives you a loan. People just have this thing about the bank, you know. And so if you can't read and you're at the school, it's not a comfortable feeling.
Right.
To be trying to advocate for your kid and the teacher's acting, well, you know, did you read our policy? Well, here, tell me what, you know, and the teacher can understand this. Mm-hmm. And so they make you feel diminished and small. So people just don't go.
Yeah.
Parents are disengaged. They don't question. If they had that power or the strength that they might get through something like Harvard Parent University to move beyond those types of things, then they would be empowered in their kids' education. So there are so many drawbacks that an individual has because they can't read or write. Very, very big problem. And that means your population is, for all intents and purposes, unemployable.
Yeah. Well, unemployable is not a good feeling. I mean, if you find you have a population base that's unemployable, now there's many jobs you can get by, and it's hard to believe you could even get by to get a job without knowing how to read or write because of the process of what you have to fill out.
Right.
But there's certainly jobs you could do that you may not have to read daily.
Right. There's probably a lot of jobs that you could get where that won't be a hindrance, but you can't get to the job.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you could get in the room, you'd be fine.
Right.
But you can't get through the door that's locked and through the guards that are guarding the door.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what reading is. It's like a guard.
Yeah.
And a locked door. If you can read, you can unlock the door and you gain access.
And also, you have to have a valid address. It's very difficult to get a job without a valid address.
Right.
You need identification too. It's just.
Well, that's a whole nother sector of our society. Reading doesn't stop you from having a valid address.
No, it doesn't. But I'm saying you have to have a valid address too. If you find yourself not stable, you don't got no fixed address, it's hard to really get plugged in too. You can work under the table now. You don't have to have a job address.
Well, we're talking about a very small and limited portion of our society. That's not a problem that's overarching that affects dominant.
But
and there may be a lot of people that are there that one may know, but that's not the normal.
But I think if you have a high poverty stricken city, sometime even if you have a fixed address, how are people really living? What's really going on in some of these homes? I mean, it's not your job to micromanage,
right.
But still, it could be playing a role.
Well, Jonathan, this is where things like churches come in. This is where things like mosques and synagogues come in, and social agencies, or I don't mean social agencies, like clubs and things like that. When you have associations with friends and family, they understand when you're having problems. But if all of those things get cut off, then where's your social circle? Where's your social safety net? As these institutions break down, there are people who feel the government should take over more of that burden. Then government stops being government.
Yeah.
And it becomes everything except government.
But see, the problem is you're going to turn to whatever is available. When those avenues do break down, which they're constantly breaking down, you're going to find that the government is where you're going to turn to.
And then people are finding out that government can't help them. The government is not a viable solution for them. That's what happens. So the thing is how do you strengthen those institutions? How do you strengthen the things that bind and make community? And there are ways to do that.
Well, you see, I heard rapper Ice-T made a statement, and I never thought about it. He said, anytime you say yes to something, it's like he's saying no to, if somebody asks you to do something, and if it's not a job, you now are going to be held accountable. Like he said that if somebody asks you for a ride to the airport, you have to now get up at a certain time. So if somebody came to you and said, okay, I need you to take me to the airport 2 days a week because the bus doesn't run on Saturdays and Sundays. Now you are basically taking on this person's I'm
gonna do him a favor.
Yeah. But it's like if you tell a person no, sometimes
they go find someone else.
They go find someone else. So sometimes you gotta know how to say no. I guess that's what his point was.
Right. I don't have a problem. Now,
you don't have a problem.
You know me well enough to know that I have no problem saying no.
But you don't want to. if you're in a position to help somebody, you don't really want to always turn that person down if that person is in dire need.
If I can help somebody, I'll do the best I can, but I'm not obligated to help somebody.
No.
That's not I'm not obligated to help you.
Yeah.
I choose to help you.
Right.
If there are plenty of people who want to make it seem like you are less than a human being for not helping them. That is a really slick trick that some people have mastered. That absolutely does not work with me.
Right.
No.
Well, that's all. I'm my brother's keeper and all of these methods that we have. I mean, that's the whole purpose, I think, of some of these social agencies that you're talking about. They're trying to help people that need help.
There's nothing wrong with helping people. I spent my entire life helping people, but my desire to help you is not obligatory. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people will put that on you. Church folk are like that.
Right.
Yo, brother, I think the Spirit of the Lord has moved upon me to ask you to be a blessing. That's interesting that God would move on you like that and not me, since I'm the source of the blessing. So people will try those things. Don't you want to be a blessing today? Well, yeah. Well, then if you just help me out on this situation, God will bless. God blesses me every day I wake up. So people will try those things on you. Should you help people as best you can, but don't let them put you on a guilt trip because you are not in a position to do something because they think you are.
Yeah.
A lot of times people that'll help folk give their last, and the person that's receiving has no idea concept, and lots of times is totally ungrateful for the help that you just gave them.
Well, again, just be careful when we're starting to saying why things are not getting done and why you're having all of these issues. I mean, it's, again, just somebody, I don't again know the circumstance. And it was a hit and run incident in Minneapolis. I mean, things can happen, obviously, but as you just mentioned, man, this public safety issue, and Joe Markley was mentioning, this is the third person in the city that's been killed by some type of hit and run driver within the last 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, that's something that can actually be, that's just reckless lawlessness. It's not like conflicts that arise and someone winds up getting shot.
Right.
Those are things that are beyond the control of other people. But reckless driving through the city, that's something that you can do something about.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, like I say, how we go about it. I mean, I know I got a friend on Cornwall Street. He's upset because he can't get speed bumps. That don't do
Cornwall Street, man. I've seen folk do 60 miles an hour.
So you know about Cornwall?
Oh yeah. Oh, I've been on the corners.
Yeah.
I blow through the stop sign like it ain't even
Yeah.
It's Cornwall.
And the street looks so quiet.
And I'm
peaceful.
talking Cornwall Street above Tower.
Yeah.
Where the community's kind of tight. Just blow right through the stop sign. It just doesn't make no sense.
Well, this person I know, they lives near the Granby side, but he said it's a lot of speeding, and he even tried to get speed bumps. It was such a problem. And I think speed bumps can help, but these
speed bumps will help, but what we need is law and order.
Law and order. And
a respect for community and your fellow citizens, and not so much just do what you want to do, riding through the city like it's some sort of a game. Driving is a privilege. It's not a right, and that privilege should be taken away from some people if they can't play by the rules. We have to get back to a time where people are held accountable, not by government, but by their neighbors.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable. And the neighbors have to have a sense that that's unacceptable and we want you to do something about it. That's how that all works.
Well, like I say, let's try to end it on somewhat of a positive message. And I think what you just said is kind of a positive message. In a couple weeks, we'll be talking about 1983. And maybe I can utilize this national topic from 1983 to some of the basics. And hopefully Miss Cody, former 6th grade teacher, be on in a couple months if she's going to be in town. Yeah, because it just seemed like, I mean, it used to be a time if someone hit someone, they would stop. But it's like you just taking a risk, man. The average person runs into somebody and kills somebody, and that person is gone. You know,
there's no accountability. No accountability.
Yeah.
No accountability.
And well, that and no consciousness neither. You can kill someone. I guess that's like a gun almost.
These are deep societal issues that can be dealt with, but it has to be intentional. And you know.
Well, it would have been nice if Mayor Luke Bronin could have addressed this a little bit more between this incident and.
He may have addressed. I can't speak for him. He may have addressed it. You just didn't hear about it.
I just probably didn't hear about it. But the sticker, but the writing on the Black Lives Matter, I heard about that 4 separate times.
That's not the mayor's fault. That's the press.
The press.
The press was reporting on that because it was a very critical issue, and no one knew who did it. That's understandable.
Okay.
You know, we're in the midst of very racial tension in the country, so it's not odd that got as much press as it did. It's unfortunate, but it's not odd.
Yeah, so the press was involved in that. Okay, that's fair.
Not that we're blaming the press, but I mean, it's not the mayor doesn't get to decide what you hear, unless he's over your house talking in your ear. So,
well, let's hope Mayor Bronin is very passionate and committed towards all public safety incidents.
I think he is.
I think he is. Right.
We're out of time, Jonathan.
All right. Thank you again for this show. Again, get it underneath the belt. And let me work on finding someone for next week.
All right.
Okay.
All right, my friends. We'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.